Hello everybody, I'm Matthew Perry, the COMP2511 course administrator. This is the Week 7 tutorial recording. So this is going to be covering JavaFX and JUnit. So the first thing to mention, please watch these JavaFX videos and complete the JavaFX self-exercise. The links for these are in that exercise and also in the Lab 7 repository you've been given. To start off with, we need to set up the project repository since I'm using Windows, okay? It's the way it's been set up, it will work on a CSE machine, okay? So I've downloaded the repository and an OpenJFX and JUnit platform console standalone jar file from the internet. So to get the JavaFX, you go to this link provided in the project repository. And I'm going to use the JavaFX 11 Windows SDK and download that using the download button. For the JUnit 5, I'm using the JUnit platform console standalone jar file for version 1.7 M1, and you download that using this button over here in the Maven repository linked through the lab. So I've downloaded those files. To set this up for Windows, I need to copy the bin directory over and paste this into the root directory of the repository. I need to copy the contents of the lib directory from the JavaFX, and that gets pasted into the lib directory. I get rid of these two symbolic links, and we also need to copy this JUnit jar file into the lib directory, and that should work after we have edited the launch.json file to import from /lib instead of from the symbolic link. Okay, that should be all the configuration we need. Now, using any of these, you need to open the root directory of the repository. So I've gone one level up from the SRC directory, and I'm going to right click that and say open in code. Hello everybody, so now we're going to be focusing on the emphasis backend. Okay, so we need to make an emphasis class with a string inside it, and that's going to have some text that we emphasize by setting to uppercase and adding exclamation marks at the end. I've already set up my directory structure, so I've got folders example/emphasis under the src directory. So I'm going to make a new file, emphasis.java. Okay, so that sets up the package for me quite nicely. And I'm just going to say private string text. So we need a constructor, so public emphasis and then we say this.text equals empty string. Now we're going to need getter and setter methods for this string text. So public string get text, return text, and public void set text, string text, and then just say this.text equals text. Now we need the emphasize method to be added in. So this is going to be public void emphasize, and for this we're going to say if it's not ending with an exclamation mark already, then we're going to capitalize it and add 4 exclamation marks at the end. Okay, so if not get text dot ends with exclamation mark, so ends with is just a string method. Okay, so that's in the Java string documentation. Then we're going to emphasize it. So this set text actually, get text dot to uppercase plus exclamation marks. You might be wondering why I'm using get text and set text inside here instead of just accessing text variable. This is because later on I'm going to want to switch this over to using a string property. So this is the backend model built. So now we need to create an emphasis test class. Okay, so I'm going to double check the requirements of the system. So we just need to add some tests using JUnit. Okay, so to start off with this, we need to import several libraries. Okay, so we're going to start off and say import static.org.junit.jupyter.api.assertions.assert equals. That should be fine. Import, no, it doesn't have a full stop after here. There we go. Then we're going to say import org.junit.jupyter.api.test, and then import org.junit.jupyter.params. We're going to use a parameterized test because this allows us to pass in several string values for testing the idempotency of our emphasize method. Then we're going to say import org.junit.jupyter.params.provider.value source. So this test tag here has been imported so that we can tag methods with tests so that we can then run it in JUnit. So we're going to start off by saying our test, and then we're going to say public void test emphasize. Now we're just going to say emphasis e equals new emphasis. We're just going to say e.setText ABC and then e.emphasize. And then we're going to be able to use this assert equals method from JUnit to check that this matches the text we expect it to have. So the assert equals method is more powerful than a simple assert, because if it's not matching what you expect, then it's going to throw an error, let you know which character the strings are different at. It also has more powerful assert methods such as assert array equals, assert exception thrown, etc., that you can find in the JUnit documentation. So it's very powerful. So I'm just going to say assert equals ABC for exclamation marks, and then e.get text. Okay, so that's our first test. So the next test we're going to be using is a parameterized test. So this is going to pass in several string values and test that when we run the emphasize method a second time, is going to have the same result. It shouldn't have any change on the text after emphasizing the first time. So we're going to say at parameterized test at value source strings equals, let's just say ABC. Let's try empty string. Let's try something with spaces. Let's try something with an exclamation mark at the beginning and something with one at the end. So for this, we're going to say public void test idempotency string input. So we're going to say emphasis e equals new emphasis, and we're going to say e.setText input, and then we're going to emphasize, so e.emphasize, and then say string first emphasis equals e.get text, and then we're going to run emphasize again. So e.emphasize, and then assert equals first emphasis e.get text, because we run emphasize a second time. Let's try running these tests, see what actually happens. So I'll just hit run test. We can see it's running tests at the bottom. Okay, so I've got 2 next to the ticks, 0 next to the crosses, so the tests have passed. And this is the Java test report we get. So it passes both tests. Okay. So just a note, if you want to have the Java test runner, which is the extension which makes run test appear, you need to install the Java test runner. Okay, so I've got this installed already. Notice that this actually came in the Java extension pack that we instructed you to install at the beginning of the trimester. So you should already have this installed. So I'm just going to check the requirements for the next section of the tutorial. Okay, so just one thing to note, the only method that needs to be tested in this backend is the emphasize method, because the setters and getters are trivial, they don't need testing. Okay, so now we need to change the model so that it uses a string property from JavaFX instead of using a string. Okay, so to do this, we're going to just going to import JavaFX string property. So this is in the emphasis class. So we're going to say import JavaFX.beans.property.simple string property, and then we're going to say import JavaFX.beans.property.string property. So for this, we now need to say string property text. So to get the actual text out of the string property, well, first of all, we need to construct the string property. So you need to say new string property. It should be new simple string property. There we go. So now we would say return text dot get. If you can see the suggestions here, it says get. This gives us the actual value of the string. If we want to set the text, then we'd say text dot set text. Sorry, we should have said this dot text. There we go, because it needs to actually reference the string property. That was why it was having an error. It was looking at the actual string rather than the string property. Now, notice that the emphasize method doesn't have to be changed because we utilize the getters and setters to obtain the string and pass the string. So we had to do very little modification to actually make the string property work for this code. One little thing to notice about the string property is that it's essentially just a wrapper around a string value. So it's essentially just a class that contains a string field inside it. Okay, so this enables you to effectively implement a observe pattern in JavaFX where you would store the string property in both the front-end UI and also the back-end model, so that it's very easy to modify the back-end and instantly see the change appear in the front-end. So one thing to note, by the way, since the emphasize method didn't have to change, the getters and setters didn't have to change, and we're just passing in and retrieving values, we're not actually directly accessing that string, the test should actually run the same, which they do, so they still pass. Okay, so no modifications need to be made there because you set this emphasis class up such that minimal modification was needed to switch from a string to a string property. Hello everybody. So now we're going to set up the graphical user interface using Scene Builder. So one useful package or extension that I've installed is the Scene Builder extension for Visual Studio Code. So once you run the command configure Scene Builder path and connect that up to the relevant Scene Builder file, which is described in more detail on the Java FX self-exercise, then you'll be able to just right-click an fxml file and select Open in Scene Builder. So Scene Builder is a what you see is what you get application that allows you to drag and drop widgets and to have it produce the fxml file for you, which is very convenient. So I'm going to make a new file, emphasis view.fxml, and we're going to open this in Scene Builder. Open in Scene Builder. This might take a few seconds. Okay, so I need an empty template. So new from template. We're just going to save it as this fxml document. There we go. So now it's showing us the fxml file. I need to create a pane as the root element. So I want to say insert pane. Okay, so pane, there we go. So we've got a pane. So now we need to add a text field. So insert controls, I believe, and text field. There we go, text field. So I'm just going to drag and drop this. There we go. So that's our text field. And I need to get an FX ID of text. Okay, so this is text. That's the ID. There we go. The next requirement is add a button with the text emphasized and give it an on-action handle emphasize. So there we go. Okay, so insert button, controls button. So that's going to be dragged under the pane. And we're going to use the handle emphasize method. So on action handle emphasize. There should be an on actions section here somewhere. There we go. Handle emphasis. Okay, so that's following the instructions there. And then we've saved the fxml file. Hello everyone, so now that we've run the Scene Builder app, we have an fxml file. This is a bit complicated. That's because it already had some widgets inside it. But if we wrote this from scratch or we were to delete those widgets, then it wouldn't be an issue as much anymore. But nonetheless, if we look inside it, we have a text field with an fx ID of text. Okay, we've just might reconfigure that like that. And we've got handle emphasis as the on action method. So when that button is clicked, that button here, that's going to run the handle emphasis method from the controller. And we're going to have the text button on the button. So now we need to make a new class called emphasis controller. Okay, so I'm going to say new file, emphasis controller. .java. Package examples.emphasis. Public class emphasis controller. Okay, so there's a few things we need to do inside here. We need to import action event, fxml, and text field. Okay, so import javafx.event.action event. Import javafx.fxml.fxml, and import javafx.scene.control.text field. There we go. And we just need to have an emphasis controller class which has a text field inside it. So at fxml private text field text. So this actually stores a string property inside it, which is very convenient. It allows us to set up a observer pattern between this emphasis controller and the backend model that we developed, the emphasis class. Notice that because this is called text, it's going to be referenced by the fxml file, and the fxml tag allows it to be registered within fxml. So we're going to say private emphasis. We don't need to use fxml here because this is part of our backend. It's not something that needs to be registered by JavaFX. So to just make a constructor, so emphasis controller, we're just going to say emphasis equals new emphasis. And we're going to need initialize and handle emphasis methods. So at fxml, public void handle emphasize action event. So essentially, we're actually working within the framework of JavaFX. So JavaFX will call our handle emphasis method based on it being in the fxml file, and then it's going to pass an action event object which contains information about what actually happened. So we're just simply going to say emphasis.emphasize. Now we need to have an initialize method. So this is something expected by fxml. So it's going to expect to call our initialize method. So public void initialize. And we're going to say text property. There we go. Dot bind by directional. So this is a very powerful method in JavaFX. So it enables us to pass in another text property. In this case, it's going to be the one from the emphasis class. And then when one is updated, the other is updated, etc. Okay, so this is saying when the emphasis text property is updated, it'll update the one in emphasis controller. And when the one in emphasis controller is updated, it's going to affect the one in the emphasis object. Now to do this, we actually need to be able to return a string property from emphasis. So we need to say public string property get string property, or let's just say text property, return text. Okay, this was automatically imported. So actually, no, it was already imported before. So when we bind bidirectional, we're actually going to obtain the string property of emphasis. So emphasis dot get text. So in a way, this does tightly couple them, but on the flip side, it's very effective in improving the structure of a code because you're using an observer pattern to correlate the back end and the front end in terms of not having to call so many helper methods. It automatically updates things when one is updated. So this will reduce the amount of code that is necessary. Right. Uh, this is because I called the wrong method. It should be text property, not get text. There we go. Okay, that has been completed. So let's look at the next set of instructions for the tutorial. So just a few questions that have been provided inside the tutorial. So why does one of the UI controls have a corresponding field in the controller but the other doesn't? So this is because only controls that have an FX ID can be fielded in the controller class. Informally, what does the fxml annotation do? So this is essentially registering it with fxml. So we've added a controller. We've completed the handle emphasize method. So this is called from this fxml here. Just note that. Okay. So it's important that that has that particular name, has an action event, and also uses the fxml tag. Hello everyone. Now that the controller has been created, we need to create an application class that runs is a subclass of a JavaFX application. So this is going to include a start method that is run when we start up the application. And it's also going to be where we run the application is going to include the main method that we're used to seeing in Java applications, and then pass control using the launch method to JavaFX. So to do this, I'm going to say new file, emphasis application. Note that this was required as such in the configuration. So we need to import several components of JavaFX. First of all, we need to say import javafx.application.application, which we're going to subclass in this class. We need to say import javafx.fxml.fxml loader. We need to say import javafx.scene.parent, import javafx.scene.scene, and import javafx.stage.stage. Okay, so we're going to say this extends a JavaFX application. Okay, so first of all, we need a main method. So public static void main string args. And then we simply pass these arguments to JavaFX to give it control. So we're going to say launch args. So this allows you to pass command line arguments to JavaFX. So it's complaining here, add an implemented method. So as we can see, it actually requires us to have a start method. I'm going to call this stage primary stage. And I'm going to say, first of all, we want to set the title. Okay, so we're going to say primary stage.set title. We're going to call this emphasis. Now we're going to say fxml loader equals new fxml loader. There we go. Get class dot get resource is going to be emphasis view.fxml. So we're passing in the fxml file that's going to configure it. This was incorrectly named. It's case sensitive. There we go. So now we need to say parent root equals loader.load. And we're then going to say scene equals new scene root. So we're creating a new scene with the parent root, which we've loaded out from the fxml loader. Then we're going to say primary stage.set scene, and then say primary stage.show. Okay, so now we should be able to run this application. Let's see what happens and hope it works. No controller specified. Okay, so here we go. Caused by JavaFX.fxml.load exception. So the problem here is in our fxml file, we haven't properly configured what the controller is going to be. So we're going to very quickly fix this. So we're just going to go to the fxml file and just need to double check what we need to do. Pane. And then we're going to say fx controller equals examples. We're just going to give it the class path, the package name, or the package then class name of the emphasis controller. So emphasis controller. There we go. Let's try running this again. Hello everyone, so I've gone back and worked on the file separately and figured out the issues. So there were a couple of issues with it. Okay, and I've reproduced the errors in a simpler version of the file so that it's easier to work through and understand it better. So if we were to run this right now, we're first of all going to see a parse error for the fxml file. So here we go, we see a load exception and we see an XML stream exception parse error. So first of all, JavaFX requires you to pass XMLNS and XMLNSFX. Okay, so these essentially give information from online what the version of XML is and the JavaFX version. Okay, so this is needed for the fxml to be processed. Now, if we were to run this again, there's still an error. So this error is saying construct load exception. Okay, so one of the annoying things about JavaFX is that it can have very difficult to understand errors, and that's something you're going to have to work around in your project. If we look down here though, error resolving on action equals hand emphasis. It's not in the namespace or there is an error in the script. So what this is actually complaining about is that I simply got a spelling mistake here. It's supposed to be handle emphasize, okay, because when it goes to the on action value, it's actually looking at handle emphasize registered under the fxml tag here, over here. So we need to simply add an E there and it should work. Okay, so when we hit run, this should work now. Okay, there we go. So if I type in blah, okay, there it correctly works. So just a few tips here. Be careful about naming things correctly. So you want to make sure that inside the fxml file, all of your IDs are correctly named in particular. So something like your on action needs to be correct. Okay, otherwise you'll get weird errors that are hard to understand. You need to include these values in the correct place. You need to specify your controller correctly. So I needed to specify fx controller and specify the emphasis controller. And you need to specify your fx ID of your text field if you want it to be updated. So, and remember, this then links in into the controller, into this text field over here. So it's important to be very careful with naming everything correctly, particularly the IDs and the on action methods, so that it's able to actually load up and correlate your code with what's actually in the fxml file. So just be very careful about that because the errors are very confusing often. So it's often easier just to be very careful that you've actually done it correctly. It might help often to work using a simpler file. Okay, so I'm just going to double check the tutorial instructions. One thing to note, why do we use a bidirectional binding? So this makes it, this implements an observer pattern, and therefore you need less code to update back and forth when the string is updated either on the front end by the user or on the back end by the back end logic. Okay, so this is just standard code that makes it much easier to do this common task. Okay, so that's the week 7 tutorial recording finished. Good luck on your milestone 1 demos this week, and good luck on working on milestone 2 and then milestone 3 later on. See you guys, have a good one.